I always thought my dad loved us equally. That illusion shattered the day he told me, with a grin no less, that he'd used my inheritance, money my mother had left for me, to start a business. Not for me. Not even with me. For my brother, Ryan. "You'll thank me later," he said, laughing, brushing off my stunned silence like it was teenage moodiness. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and crushed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about fairness, about family. I still remember the way the sun bled through the slats in our living room blinds that day, casting stripes across the floor like prison bars. Dad sat there, his legs spread wide, one arm draped over the back of the couch like he was relaxing at a bar with his friends instead of detonating the very foundation of his daughter's trust. Ryan stood by the window, arms crossed, doing a terrible job hiding his smug satisfaction. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a declaration. A verdict. I wasn't part of the plan. I was a casualty of it. "You weren't doing anything with it anyway," he added with a shrug, like it was monopoly money, like it hadn't been left to me by the only parent who ever made me feel seen. "Mom left that for me," I said quietly, voice shaking with the kind of fury that lives just beneath the surface, too proud to cry, too stunned to scream. "She said it was mine for college, for a house, for whatever I needed to build a future." Dad waved a hand in the air as if swatting a fly. "You're smart. You'll figure things out." Ryan needed a leg up, and this is his shot. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always feel like a stab. Sometimes it feels like a slow twist, like your heart turning to ash from the inside out. Ryan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The grin on his face said it all. He won. Again. Just like he always did. But what no one noticed in that moment, in the thick fog of their self-satisfaction and casual cruelty, was how still I had become. How quiet. Because I wasn't breaking. I was transforming. I'm not sure how I drove home that night. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, and my chest ached like I'd been punched by the very people who claimed to love me. The world outside the windshield passed in a blur, houses with glowing windows, strangers laughing in restaurants, families walking dogs like the world wasn't a cruel, twisted joke. When I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment, I didn't turn off the engine right away. I just sat there in the dark, the hum of the motor vibrating through my seat while my mind replayed every moment of that conversation, like a courtroom cross-examination. And in that silence, I made a decision. They wanted war? Fine. I'd give them one. But not the kind with screaming and slammed doors. No, I was going to do it the same way they betrayed me. With a smile. With strategy. With precision. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, a pen, and a memory so sharp it could draw blood. I listed everything Ryan had ever gotten that I hadn't. Every lie Dad ever told that I swallowed. Every time Mom's voice had been the only shield I had, and how easily that shield had been discarded after she died. I remembered the Christmas when Ryan crashed Mom's car and Dad bought him a new one with the money they said they didn't have. I remembered how I paid my own way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs while Ryan found himself on backpacking trips funded by that same mysterious family budget. I remembered being told I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need help. And I remembered the last words Mom said to me in the hospital. "Don't trust your father with that money. Make sure it's protected. It's for your future. Promise me." I had promised. And now I'd broken that promise. Because I trusted him. Because I didn't think he'd actually do it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I called a lawyer. He was a no-nonsense woman named Brianna Glass, recommended by one of the senior partners at my firm. She wore blazers like armor and spoke like every word was a loaded gun. I liked her instantly. I told her everything. The will. The transfer. The so-called business investment. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for sympathy. I laid it all out like an autopsy. She nodded, scribbling in her legal pad. "And you never signed anything giving him access?" "Nothing." "Then this is going to be fun." For the first time in days, I smiled. But filing legal paperwork wasn't enough. Because this wasn't just about the money. This was about what they took from me. My voice. My place in the family. The illusion that I mattered. And if they were going to reduce me to a footnote in their golden boy's success story, then I was going to make damn sure they regretted every word. I didn't speak to either of them for weeks. I moved out, stopped answering calls, went ghost. Every update about the business felt like salt in an open wound. My brother? Thriving. My father? Proud. Me? Working 2 jobs and living in a shoebox apartment with cracked walls and a landlord who didn't believe in hot water. But pain has a way of sharpening your focus. The kind of pain that doesn't just sting, but lingers in your bloodstream like venom, whispering reminders that you were disposable. That the people who should have protected you didn't even hesitate to throw you under the bus the moment it suited them. At night, I would lie on the warped mattress in my freezing bedroom, listening to the radiator wheeze and my upstairs neighbor stomp through his nightly routine, and I would think about that moment, my father's smirk, Ryan's silence. The betrayal so loud I could still hear it echoing in my bones. That money wasn't just currency. It was my mother's love, preserved in paper. It was the future she carved out for me when she knew she wouldn't live to see it. And he gave it away like it was spare change in the bottom of his pocket. So no, I didn't cry anymore. Not after that first week. Instead, I planned. It started small, quiet, strategic. The kind of moves they wouldn't see coming, not because I was subtle, but because they didn't believe I had it in me. They thought I was soft. They thought being the good daughter meant I'd sit down, shut up, and let them rewrite history without lifting a finger to stop it. They forgot where I got my spine from. At my second job, I worked nights at a bar on 5th and Langston, the kind of place with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played sad country ballads and angry girl rock. It wasn't glamorous, but the tips were good and the owner didn't ask too many questions when I said I needed extra shifts. On slow nights, I'd sit at the end of the bar, counting receipts and sketching ideas in the back of a beat-up composition notebook. The label on the front was peeled halfway off, and I'd scribbled over it in thick black marker, reclamation. Inside were floor plans, brand colors, marketing ideas, inventory projections, even slogans. Every detail was intentional. Every word, a strike of lightning aimed at the empire my father and brother were building off my mother's grave. They wanted to start a business? Fine. I'd build a better one. Stronger. Sharper. Smarter. And when it rose high enough to cast a shadow over theirs, I'd burn every bridge between us just to light the path forward. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this was easy. I scraped together money from tips, selling old textbooks, even pawning the necklace Mom gave me when I graduated high school. That part hurt more than I expected. But sentiment doesn't pay for LLC registration, and I needed to start somewhere. Brianna, my lawyer, helped me set up the business paperwork after her last court hearing one Friday. She handed me the folder with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "Let them build off your inheritance. You build off your rage. That's the kind of fire that doesn't burn out." And damn if she wasn't right. I named the business Daughters and Ash. It was a boutique design consultancy, one built for women who were done asking permission and tired of making themselves small. Every client who walked through the door would be treated like royalty. Every contract would be airtight. Every invoice paid on time in full. And I would take the pain my family gave me and distill it into something sharp enough to cut glass. I found a tiny co-working space on the edge of downtown, barely big enough for a desk and a coffee machine, but it was mine. The first day I stepped inside, I held the keys so tight my knuckles went white. I wasn't just walking into a room. I was walking into war. Word spread faster than I expected. At first, it was friends of friends. Someone's cousin needed help rebranding their online shop. Someone's sister wanted a website for her event planning business. I took every job, no matter how small. I worked from sunup to well past midnight. I barely slept. I barely ate. But every time I saw another invoice marked paid, I felt something in me begin to reassemble. Not the old version of me. She was gone. What rose from those ashes was something stronger. Something colder. Something surgical. Meanwhile, Ryan's business, our business, if we're being accurate, was exploding. Press releases. Newspaper interviews. Dad posing in front of their new storefront like he hadn't stolen a legacy and dressed it in buzzwords. They called it the foundation, as if that word wasn't already soaked in the irony of how they built it. I watched from a distance, eyes like a hawk. Every launch party. Every client announcement. Every investor. And I wasn't just watching. I was documenting. Because revenge isn't about making a scene. It's about building a case so undeniable that when the hammer finally drops, there's nothing left standing but truth. 3 months after launching Daughters and Ash, I got my first corporate contract. It came from a nonprofit that needed a full digital overhaul, branding, UX, strategy, the works. I underbid every competitor by 30% and guaranteed results in half the time. I didn't just want the job. I needed it. Because this was how I climbed the ladder high enough to pull theirs down. And I delivered. On time. Under budget. With metrics so strong their board sent me a handwritten thank you card and 6 months' worth of referrals. That was the moment I knew I had them. Not yet. Not fully. But the foundation had started to shake. One night, nearly 6 months after I'd gone nuclear on my family, I saw Ryan at a networking event. I hadn't planned on attending, but Brianna insisted. Said I needed to be seen. He didn't recognize me at first. I'd dyed my hair, swapped my usual jeans for a black suit that cost more than my first used car, and wore a look on my face that said, "You're standing in my way." When his eyes finally landed on me, they went wide, then narrowed. A flicker of something guilt? Disbelief? Fear crossed his face. "You look different," he said, nursing a drink he probably didn't pay for. "You don't," I replied and walked away before he could respond. Because now I had something he didn't. Power. Not in the sense of money or influence. But the kind of power that comes from knowing you've already survived the worst thing they could do to you, and you're still standing. Later that night, I got an email from his assistant. "Hi, I hope you're well. Ryan asked me to reach out and schedule a coffee meeting, just to catch up." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Brianna with a single note. "Let me know when we're ready to go for their throat." She called me 10 minutes later, laughing so hard she could barely speak. I've waited my entire career to say this. Let's go scorched earth. One night, a friend from college who'd gone into finance sent me a message. "You seen this? Your brother's business is tanking." I dove into the numbers. Turns out, the company was bleeding cash fast. Bad leadership, bloated expenses, no clear vision. And here's the kicker. The silent investor my dad had lined up to help them, he'd pulled out. Quietly. Strategically. Guess who'd been working with him behind the scenes? Me. It started 6 months earlier, during a dinner that was supposed to be strictly professional. I had just finished a pitch presentation for a tech startup in a trendy bar-turned-conference lounge when a man introduced himself as Glenn Barlow. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, eyes like cooled steel. His reputation in the industry was no secret, early investor in 3 Fortune 500s, known for cutting off dead weight faster than it could sink. He asked me what I was building. I told him Daughters and Ash wasn't just a business. It was an answer. A statement. A middle finger to the gatekeepers who guarded their thrones with generational wealth and selective memory. He didn't smile, not exactly. But something in his expression shifted. Respect, maybe. Curiosity, definitely. Then he said 7 words that changed the entire trajectory of my revenge. "I think we may have common enemies." Turns out Glenn had been approached by my father months before, sold a pitch about a revolutionary new retail model that would combine real estate, e-commerce, and influencer marketing. It was flashy. Hollow. No substance. Just sound bites and spreadsheets rigged with assumptions. Glenn, being the calculating strategist he was, didn't pull out immediately. He strung them along with small commitments, just enough to keep them scaling unsustainably. Encouraged growth. Increased overhead. Suggested expensive hires. Whispered promises of funding rounds that never materialized. And all the while, he funneled information to me. Financials. Operational weaknesses. Internal conflicts between Dad and Ryan. Vendor disputes. Staff attrition. Branding inconsistencies. Lawsuits brewing quietly in HR. It was a blueprint of collapse, laid bare at my feet. Not just to watch, but to engineer. I began coordinating with a network of former clients and newly loyal partners, those who'd benefited from Daughters and Ash and now owed me favors. I didn't ask for sabotage. I didn't need to. All I did was tell the truth. When asked if the foundation paid invoices on time, I gave the actual data. When asked if their branding was original, I shared timestamped design theft complaints from a smaller competitor. When someone inquired about their leadership, I sent over recordings of publicly available ones, of course, where Ryan berated junior staff during live-streamed investor calls, his ego bleeding through the screen like gasoline. In silence, they buried themselves. I just handed out the shovels. Then came the media hits. Not from me directly. I wasn't about to taint my hands with that mess. But the industry blogs? They were already circling like vultures. One headline stood out. Too fast, too fragile, the crumbling of the foundation. The photo? A shot of my father standing in front of a now open banner, looking like a man who had just realized the rope he climbed was made of sand. I printed the article, framed it, hung it in my office, right beside the photo of my mother. When the official collapse came, it wasn't with a bang. It was slow, systemic. Death by 1,000 unpaid invoices and shattered illusions. Employees walked out. Contracts dried up. Their accountant resigned. Even their PR rep posted a vague but scathing thread about toxic family-led startups. Ryan finally reached out. Not with arrogance. Not with smugness. With something I hadn't seen on his face since we were kids' fear. He messaged me from a burner email. "I know you're behind this. We need to talk." I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply window for 10 full minutes before closing the laptop and going to bed. Because he was wrong. We didn't need to talk. He needed to listen. The next day, my father called. The man who once laughed while stealing my inheritance was suddenly using words like misunderstanding and rebuild and family unity. I let him talk. Every sentence felt like watching a king beg to keep his crown while the castle burned around him. Then I said something I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times, but never thought I'd say out loud. "You stole my future, and I let you. But now I've built something bigger, something cleaner, and it's mine. So you want family? You start by acknowledging what you did." Silence. Then he hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. But the story didn't end with them falling. Because revenge, if done right, is never about one act. It's a crescendo, a culmination, a revelation. So I built higher. I hired my first full-time employee, a woman who'd been blackballed by her last company for reporting harassment. She cried when I offered her the job. "I'm not giving you a chance," I told her, handing over the key fob. "You're earning a future they never thought you deserved." We grew. Fast. New clients came in through word of mouth and reputation. Investors started circling. I didn't bite. I didn't need to. I wasn't building to sell. I was building to last. For every woman like me who had something taken and was told to smile through it. For every daughter overlooked, every sister silenced, every girl who was told she was just being emotional. Daughters and Ash wasn't just my company anymore. It was a movement. At the 1-year anniversary, we hosted a gala. Not at some sterile hotel ballroom or rooftop bar. No. I rented the space that had once belonged to the foundation, their flagship location, the crown jewel of their doomed empire. I bought it at auction for pennies on the dollar. I gutted it. Rebuilt it. Where their logo once hung, I installed a mural of burning roses, our company symbol, now painted 10 feet high. Where their reception desk once stood, I placed a steel sculpture forged from reclaimed wood and metal, engraved with a single phrase: "She who is underestimated becomes unstoppable." My mother would have loved that. She never got to see the woman I became. But I think, deep down, she always knew. I'd been learning, saving, watching. I knew the business better than they did because I studied it like it owed me something. When they listed the company for sale, desperate to recover anything, I stepped in, using a front company, a legal veil they didn't recognize. The day the papers were signed, I walked into that office and Ryan's face turned white. My dad was there. Confused. Nervous. I looked him in the eye and said, "You said I'd thank you later. So, thanks." There's something profoundly satisfying about watching the expressions of those who wronged you collapse in real time. It wasn't shock. Not really. It was the slow, horrifying realization that the story they thought they were writing had been co-authored, edited, and footnoted by the person they assumed was out of the picture entirely. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed, like he was trying to find a script that didn't exist anymore. His eyes darted from the contract on the table to the assistant who had escorted me in, as if hoping anyone would tell him this was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was deliberate, legal, final, and above all, it was earned. I walked through the space slowly, letting my heels echo across the marble floors they had insisted on installing to impress clients they never kept. The walls were still lined with framed magazine covers, awards, faux inspirational quotes they'd printed over stock photos of bridges and mountain ranges. Every corner screamed, "Look at us, we matter." But all I saw was borrowed glory and hollow ambition. I paused at the conference room door. The last time I'd been there was years ago, back when it was a shell of drywall and dust and promises. Ryan had stood there, talking about vision and disruption and market penetration, words he barely understood, pitching dreams he never intended to build with his own hands. Now he stood in the same room, but this time, I was on the other side of the glass. I had no interest in meeting halfway. The lawyer from the firm handling the acquisition, a tall, precise woman named Nyla, laid the final documents on the table. Her voice was cool, neutral, clinical. "This confirms full transfer of all company assets, liabilities, trademarks, and operating accounts to DNA Holdings LLC. As agreed, the former leadership team will be released effective immediately, with non-compete clauses taking effect within 24 hours. She handed me the pen, and without flinching, I signed. The silence afterward was thick enough to drown in. My father finally spoke, his voice brittle and careful, like he was trying to build a bridge out of broken matchsticks. "This wasn't necessary," he said, hands folded like he was offering some kind of moral authority he no longer possessed. "You could have just come to us. We would have worked something out." I didn't smile. I didn't rage. Instead, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, letting my eyes pierce through every layer of denial he'd tried to wrap himself in. "You didn't give me that option," I said slowly, making sure every syllable landed like a weight on his chest. "You made decisions about my life behind my back. You took something that wasn't yours to give. And then you told me I'd be grateful." Ryan muttered something under his breath, an obscenity, maybe, or some insult he no longer had the guts to say aloud. I didn't look at him. He wasn't the target anymore. What most people don't understand about revenge is that it's not just about winning. It's about making sure they know they lost. It's about taking back the power they tried to rip out of your hands and making them watch as you use it to build something they'll never touch again. I stood up. The room seemed smaller now, suffocating under the weight of their failure. "You can keep the furniture," I said, walking toward the door. "I'll be gutting the rest." And I meant it. The next week was demolition in every sense of the word. I brought in my own team, designers, strategists, brand therapists, even an energy consultant. We scrubbed the space clean. Every logo, every slogan, Every vanity plaque and self-congratulatory slogan was ripped from the walls like rot from a wound. The foundation was no longer a company. It was a case study in hubris, and I was writing the conclusion. I didn't see Ryan again after that. Word was, he tried to launch a podcast, then a startup with some ex-frat friends from college. None of it stuck. He was still too used to coasting on charm and other people's money, and the world had stopped being impressed. As for my father, he faded even faster. Retired, they said. Pulled back to focus on family. Whatever that meant. He never called, never wrote, never apologized. But a year after the acquisition, I received a small package. No return address. Inside was a framed photo of my mother. She was young in the picture, radiant, laughing at something just out of frame. Her hand rested on a hospital bed, mine, I think. Newborn me wrapped in a pink blanket, her eyes locked on me like I was the only thing that mattered. Taped to the back was a single yellowed note in her handwriting. For her future, not his. I cried for the first time in 18 months. Not out of grief, out of clarity. I moved the business headquarters into that same building 6 months later. We rebranded the entire street-facing facade, turning what had once been a monument to masculine ego into a space that celebrated ambition with soul. The lobby featured stories of women who had been dismissed, underestimated, written off, who came back louder, smarter, and stronger. We called it the Vault. Every new hire added their name to the wall. Every client passed through it before entering the boardroom. It was a reminder that every empire built on stolen ground would eventually crumble, unless someone came back to reclaim it. I didn't fire them. That would have been too easy. I made my brother stay on as an intern. No title, no power, just lessons. He didn't like it, not one bit. At first, he acted like it was temporary, like he was just slumming it until something better came along. But I made sure there was no ladder, no escape, no sympathy. He fetched coffee. He took notes. He sat through meetings where no one looked at him except to correct his grammar or remind him to keep quiet. I didn't humiliate him. That's what he expected, probably what he feared. No, humiliation is loud, emotional, temporary. I made him invisible. I wanted him to live inside the feeling I carried for years, the weight of knowing you're present, but irrelevant, the ache of speaking and having your words dissolve before they land. For every time he let our father talk over me. For every smirk he threw when he thought winning was permanent. For every drop of silence that followed the theft of my future. He stayed 3 months. Quit in an email with no subject line and no goodbye. I forwarded it to HR and never mentioned his name again. My dad? I didn't ignore him. That would have been pointless. I sent him quarterly reports. Full spreadsheets, detailed summaries, the kind of thing he used to skim with a cigar in one hand and pride in the other. Each one opened with a line from his favorite quote, "You'll thank me later." He never replied. Not at first. But after the second year, after Daughters and Ash was named in a national top 50 for women-led innovation, I caught him smiling at it. My assistant told me he showed up at a public awards ceremony, sat in the back row, and clapped just once when I walked off stage. Maybe he knew all along what I was capable of. Maybe he gambled on pain becoming power. Or maybe he just played favorites. But here's the real twist. He wasn't the only one hiding something. It started with a letter. I found it one night while cleaning out my closet, searching for old tax documents in a forgotten box my mother had labeled in her perfect, looping handwriting, personal. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to me. No date. No return address. Just my name written in ink that had faded around the edges, like it had been touched too many times, like someone had held it while deciding whether to send it at all. I opened it with careful fingers, already bracing for some long-dead sentimentality that would break me open all over again. But it wasn't a letter. It was a confession. My mother had known everything, not just that my father would steal the money, not just that Ryan would be chosen, elevated, shielded at all costs. She knew because she had agreed to it. In the letter, she wrote that she'd created 2 inheritances. One visible, one hidden. The first was the account I knew about, the one they drained. The second was an investment account. Quiet. Shielded under her maiden name. Accessible only with a key she had given to someone I trusted without ever knowing why. Brianna. My lawyer. The one who took my case, protected me, pushed me toward war. She had been holding the key all along. I called her the next morning. She answered like she'd been waiting for this call. I wasn't sure when you'd find it, she said. No apology in her voice, only calm. But I'm glad you finally did. The account was real, intact, and substantial. Not just money, blueprints, seed capital. An entire business model my mother had drawn up in the last months of her life, one focused on sustainable investment in women-owned ventures. A mirror of what I had built by instinct, by anger, by necessity. She had believed in me. Quietly, fiercely. She hadn't just left me a safety net. She left me a legacy. I spent the next year building what she started. We launched the second vault, a subsidiary of Daughters and Ash, a fund dedicated entirely to women with ideas the world ignored. We didn't ask for business plans on day one. We asked for truth. We didn't require pedigree or polish. Just fire. And we lit matches under the feet of every institution that ever told a girl to sit down, be quiet, and wait her turn. Our first round funded 17 projects. All of them profitable. All of them disruptive. All of them led by women who had been told no one too many times. Every one of those founders wrote letters to future girls, sealing them in glass cases in our lobby. One of them quoted something I had said in an interview. She who is underestimated becomes unstoppable. And yet, even in triumph, the quiet never left me. Sometimes at night, I would walk through the office alone. The walls lined with portraits of our clients, the hum of computers cooling, the last echoes of ambition fading into darkness. And I would hear my mother's voice in the back of my mind, not as she was in her last days, but how she used to sound when I was little, reading to me from the end of my bed. You'll understand when you're older, she used to say. And now, finally, I did. She hadn't left me alone. She had left me the tools to build. One day, I got a call from a man who used to sit on the board of the foundation. He wanted to talk, asked to meet for coffee. Said he admired what I'd done. Said he wanted to discuss reconciliation. I let him finish his pitch, nodding politely. Then I stood, placed my untouched latte on the table, and said, I didn't come this far to apologize for winning. He blinked. You don't want to heal the past? I smiled, slow and deliberate. I'm not interested in healing what needed to be amputated. And I walked out. People ask me now if I'd do it all again. The pain, the betrayal, the years of silence. And I always tell them the truth. I wouldn't change a single thing. Because the girl they underestimated became the woman they couldn't stop. And the woman they tried to erase? She wrote the ending herself. In ink. In blood. In fire. In every language they thought she couldn't speak.